of the panelists is not going to be able to participate. So this is it good and bad? Because it's good because we're going to have more time for you guys.
Yeah.
Okay, to participate and share your knowledge on the topic of the webinar. We're going to start with a general question to all the 4 panelists, and then we're going to the specific questions that you've already received by email.
Okay.
So this means you guys have more time. If initially was 2 minutes and 10 minutes, so you can, if you need to talk a little bit more on the first question and also on the question, you're free to talk.
So, in which order should we go for the first question?
The ambassador will speak first. And then we go to Lucia, and then George and Erica. Okay? Erica, you know, you're very important, but you're from the house. You've been here before, so.
Okay, no problem. No, I'm not offended.
Oh, ladies first, please.
Okay, so our attendees are starting to join now. They can see us.
Okay.
So should we hide the video, Hannah, and just open up when it starts, or?
I will, okay. So we're starting now, and I'll share my screen.
Okay.
And it's certainly okay for everybody to see us. We have about 10 people right now online. We hope to get more. Actually, a lot more than that, 23. Yeah, it's going up. Normally, I play some music, and I could have looked up some nice Brazilian music. See, I haven't done my homework.
Oh. Good job.
George, are you teaching right now?
Yes, I'm teaching just for PhD students now, not undergrads, so it's okay. So going online with PhD students is easy. Executive students are the challenge.
You're leading the MBA program also?
Yeah, one of them, the Global Executive MBA, yes.
Okay.
That's why I was not here in the call before. I apologize. I was in a meeting with the other director of the other schools in this global program. This is the only time slot that we can meet in China and Mexico, the United States and Netherlands at the same time.
That's great exposure for the students. Yeah, excellent.
Challenge because, as you said, we cannot travel. So we have already canceled visitors to Netherlands, Poland, the United States, Mexico, and you are going to cancel China and India this year already. So tough times. But as you said, we're being more creative now.
Yeah.
Also trying to be more resilient in the future. We're changing the program, redesigning the program to face these contingencies.
Well, I know you have one of the best in all of Brazil, the best programs. So we admire your leadership there.
Thank you, Tamer. Thank you.
So we have 38 people from, actually we have others joining us from Brazil.
Yes.
I see some familiar names.
Are they listening to us now or not yet?
They are. They are. Yeah.
No, just I would like to say something. I'm looking for an honorary consul to be in Mississippi. If you know anyone interested and if the right qualifications, please let me know. It could be a Brazilian or American, and he should, he or she If they don't speak Portuguese fluently, at least they should be able to understand it and communicate in Portuguese. I would really appreciate if you could help me here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You cover the Southeast region, right?
Yes, I do.
Carlos? Yeah. So you have 5 states you oversee?
Yes.
Yeah.
In Georgia, we have the Consulate General, and in the other states, we need to have honorary consuls, but in the case of Mississippi, we haven't had one in a long time, and I'm looking for one.
Right, right.
I'm looking for a candidate, of course.
Sure.
But thank you so much.
Sure. I mean, you know, everybody on this panel will have some ideas. I'm sure they'll get back to you.
Thank you.
Excellent. So it is almost time now. And great participation.
So we are right at 11 o'clock. We are ready to get started.
Okay. Okay.
So, hello, I'm Hannah Tripp, Managing Director of Cyber at Georgia State University, and I'm excited to begin this webinar with you today. Thank you for joining us. This session is part of a series of webinars hosted by GSU Cyber and sponsored by the National Cyber MSI Consortium. You'll soon hear from GSU Professor Salomao Farias and BACC board member Maria Luiza as they moderate a discussion with a fantastic panel of Brazilian experts about the impact of COVID-19 on Brazil's economy and the role of government, private sector, and academia in the current times. But let's get some housekeeping notes out of the way before we really get started. Here with us today, in addition to myself and our brilliant panel of Brazilian experts, we also have GSU Cyber Executive Director Tamir Chavasquil and Mrs. Rebecca Brown. Using Zoom webinar lingo, we're the panelists for this session. Just a few things to point out. Everyone except for the panelists is muted in the webinar, but you can send messages to me and Rebecca, as well as Tamir and the other panelists using the chat feature. My email address is also noted here in case you need to reach out for further assistance. In addition to chat, there are a few other buttons in your Zoom control panel. If you don't see these buttons on your screen, try moving your mouse near the control panel ribbon at the bottom to hover over those buttons. From the control panel, you can raise your hand to indicate that you need something, and Rebecca will message you privately to address your concern. Once you've raised your hand, you can click the button again to lower it. We do have some time set aside at the end for questions, but you can ask a question at any point. Just click the Q&A button on the control panel or type your question, but we do ask this in English, please. Just to clarify, please use the Q&A feature and not the chat feature when submitting a question. This will help us keep things organized and running smoothly. Final thoughts before we get to the good part. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available to you for later viewing, so be on the lookout for emails from GSU Cyber with a link to the recording of today's session, as well as announcements for upcoming sessions. Also, when you exit the webinar today, you'll be prompted to answer 5 short questions about your experience. Please take 1 minute to submit your feedback, as is greatly appreciated and will help us improve future sessions. Again, if you need anything in the meantime, my email address is noted here, so feel free to reach out. I'm here and happy to help as needed. Now, without further ado, please welcome GSU Cyber Executive Director Tamir Chavasquil, who will get us started.
And thank you, Hannah, and thank you, Rebecca, in the background. Bon dia, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. I know we have some folks joining us from different time zones, Europe and elsewhere. We appreciate all of you being here. We have some over 90 people here, lots of educators, some familiar names and some new names, and welcome to everybody. I'm just here to introduce our moderators, Maria Luisa Pinho and Salomao de Farias. They have put together an outstanding panel. Brazil is always in the news as a major emerging market, has been in the news in recent times as well for a variety of reasons. So there's a lot to discuss, a lot to appreciate also in the context of international business. And I'm so glad, Maria, Luisa, and Salomao, that you have given us this opportunity to bring to discussion important issues. So thank you again, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Tamer, and thanks for everyone for joining us. Bom dia, boa tarde, that's true. We have several zones. So my name is Maria Luisa Pinho. As you may see, I am Brazilian also, but I'm a graduate research assistant here at the Georgia State University, but I'm also a board member of the BACC Southeast. So I have a little bit of the two hats here with you guys, and with Salomao, that we will run this webinar with you.
Thank you, Maria. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for all the panelists for agreeing to participate in this webinar. So my name is Salomao de Farias. I'm a visiting faculty at the Institute of International Business at Georgia State University, and I'm originally from Brazil. I teach at the University Federal de Pernambuco. I'm on a leave, and without us wasting more time, I would like to hear from all the panelists what it would be. The topic of our webinar is the international business in times of pandemics. We are facing this pandemic, the COVID pandemic, that has changed the world, and of course the world of business too. So what would be initial thought, what it would be a key message that they would like to share to the audience? And we're going to start with Ambassador Carlos Henrique de Abreu. Thank you so much. With you, Ambassador.
Well, bom dia, boa tarde. Now I switch to English. Well, thank you, Georgia State University, GSU, for the invitation to join such a distinguished group of panelists. Thank you for the kind introduction. Well, the topic before us couldn't be more opportune and appropriate. International business in times of pandemic, the case of Brazil. Well, let's get the ball rolling. The world is upside down, and Brazil is no exception. Brazil has been in a declared state of calamity since March 20. Much of the country has been in quarantine and under social distancing measures. Our nation is paying an enormous economic and social cost. However, and this must be highlighted, Brazil will be able to domestically finance the expected huge increase in public debt while avoiding a balance of payment crisis, thanks to the existence of a deep capital market, especially for a developing country, and due to the fact that Brazil's central bank has approximately $360 billion in international reserves, plus a $60 billion swap line from the US Federal Reserve Bank. We should expect for Brazil in 2021 a rapid economic recovery with a rate of growth of around 4%, a low inflation rate well below the midpoint target of 4% set by Brazil's central bank, a rather comfortable current account deficit, a little higher than 2%, a rebound of our currency, the real, after an overshooting and easing of risk aversion, and a real interest rate between 2 or 3% a year, which is extremely low for Brazilian standards. The main challenge of Brazil, like many other countries, will be to put its fiscal house in order and bring down a very high unemployment rate, perhaps 12 or 13%. I'm obviously worried, but at the same time confident that Brazil will rise to the occasion and weather this terrible crisis. Brazil will soon resume its market-friendly initiatives and reforms in order to leave behind an era of big government, state interventionism, over public spending, and high public debt. Our nation has a great growth potential with the right economic policies, as it was the country with the highest growth rates in the world during most of the 20th century. We see the United States as a key source of innovation and investment, and thanks to the support of the US, Brazil will become a full member of the OECD, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, and shall continue to adopt its best practices and guidelines. Indeed, in this very moment, the governments of Brazil and the United States are working on to put into effect a strategic trade economic pact by the end of 2020. We're using 3 bilateral mechanisms for the negotiations. The Brazil-US Commission in Trade Relations with the USTR, the Brazil-US Commercial Dialogue with the Department of Commerce, the CO Forum with our private sector, and of course, the State Department participates in this three-dimensional negotiations. And make no mistake about it, we're going to be successful in this endeavor, and our bilateral trade and investment will be an important source of renewed growth and innovation for both our nations, the 2 largest democracies and economies of the Americas, in the years and decades to come. Thank you. These are my initial remarks.
You are muted, Salomao.
I just saw it, sorry.
Okay.
Now we're going to go to Lucia Jennings, the president of the BACC Southwest, for her thoughts also on the topic of the seminar and what is a key message that she would like to tell to the audience. Lucia?
Thank you so much. And first of all, thanks Tamara, Salomao, and Maria Luiza for the invitation to take part in this webinar among great panelists. Good morning to all of you who are attending and also interested in my point of view concerning the impact on Brazil's economy during and after the COVID-19. I think the ambassador explained very well, so my key message is going to be a short one. And my message evolves from leading the Brazilian American Chamber of Commerce for 25 years with our mission to foster business and trade. My message is that the coronavirus will be an agent for change and will demand a new approach to the most common of activities that people from all countries will begin to face. Said another way, this will open opportunities for new technology, new processes, and new ways of doing business. So I see these times as a period of explosive creativity, and I remain positive for Brazil-US relations as it relates to business opportunities, whether it is the traditional business practice or even as we have seen a very large increase recently, which is through the e-commerce. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lucia. Now we're going to hear from Professor Jorge Carneiro, one of the leading researchers in international business in Brazil. And George, what is your message?
Thank you very much. So first of all, I would also like to thank Georgia State, and in particular, Professor Tamer Thiagos Gil, Salomao Farias, and Maria Luisa Pinho, right, for inviting me for this distinguished panel. Well, my message here is one of concern, meaning that what we're witnessing in the world is that where science has advanced so much, politicians seem not to be listening, right? So to talk about our two countries, we see our president in Brazil and the president of the United States behaving as if they were doctors, prescribing what to do. And many times they don't listen to what the scientists would say. So this, our populations and our economies are suffering from lack of consensus on how to fight in the short term and to prepare the medium term of the pandemic. Then we've been interviewing executives, entrepreneurs. We've been attending a lot of webinars like everybody else here. And we see that the general message in general is very much concerned with the short term in Brazil, right? But a very positive outlook for the future. And as Professor Tamer Thiagos Gil said in the very beginning, well, before the panel started, we were discussing this. This is an opportunity for us to be creative. And a lot of companies are actually being creative in how they address their let's say, their organizational model, and in particular, how they explore the technology in their favor. So the expectation is that we'll have a quick recovery, right? But some companies will actually disappear, a few others will boom. And this will depend a lot, not on what the government does, but on what the companies choose to do and engage in doing. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Now we're going to hear from Professor Erica Kovacs from Kelley Business School, Indiana University. Also, Erica, your thoughts about the topic of the webinar?
Well, first of all, good morning. Thank you all for inviting me, especially about Georgia State, Professor Tamer Thiagos Gil, Professor Salomao, Professor Maria Luisa, Hannah. So I'm going to, well, I teach cross-cultural management, so I'm going to change the topic a little bit. I think what is really interesting is to understand how countries are dealing with COVID in the light of the cultural dimensions, right? So we see how they are treating, how things are happening. And in the case of Brazil, I think it's interesting. Brazil is a very interdependent culture, cross-cultural management, interdependent, a very relationship-oriented. So that means that right now, and also Brazil is a country where people are very touchy, right? So countries which have a more open relational mobility, that means people are more touchy. First of all, they have been having more like cases at the beginning. And then second, people are struggling more in the social distancing. So that's interesting to see how people are changing their behavior in working from home, and how, especially because in Brazil, you make a lot of your relationships, your personal relationships come from your professional environment. So this is going to bring very interesting changes in the future, and that we have to understand. So they are being working from home, changes that not being able to touch, the physical distance is going to be here for a while. So this is going to affect not only the personal life, but also some industries such as entertainment, tourism. So that's something to take in consideration, how here it's different than in Brazil, US, when you compare the cross-cultural dimensions and the impact of social distancing in that. Yep.
Thank you, Erica. Now we're going to a second round in the webinar, and I'll give the word to Maria Luisa, that she'll be asking a specific question to the ambassador, Carlos Henrique.
Thank you, Salomao. And I think we had an interesting overview from the different sides of the coin, right, of how pandemic will affect. So let's go a little bit on the, again, in the government perspective, but also in the perspective of opportunities that maybe the pandemic can offer, and especially to Brazil and United States together. So we have been seeing the movement of reshoring from firms, right, since a few years ago, looking for other reshoring or even nearshoring, right? Bringing their business in the home country, but also close to the home country that they have. So with the pandemic, it seems that this pressure is increasing for the companies to reduce their dependence from China, which gives an opportunity to emerging markets, and Brazil as an emerging market. How do you believe that Brazil could profit from this movement and become like a nearshoring opportunity as a supply chain from those firms, in comparison from Vietnam and Philippines that will still be far away from them? So we have this advantage to be near sometimes, but we have also some disadvantage. So, and which industries you believe could maybe profit more or take advantage of this opportunity?
Well, Maria Luisa, that's an interesting question, intriguing perhaps. Well, these processes have been going on for some time now, a few years perhaps, and as you say, the pandemic has accelerated and made them more apparent. The present globalization process has started after the Second World War and has been going on since then with ups and downs and changes as any process. Many observers say that globalization is sliding back, and some are even seeing a deglobalization or a relative deglobalization. Indeed, in 2016, for the first time since the 70s, the United States reshored back to the country more manufacturing jobs than it offshored abroad. And well before 2016, there has been in place a process of deshoring from China and reshoring to countries in the Southeast Asia because of the increased in labor costs in China, among other factors, and the consequent rebalancing of its economy. At the same time, and Mexico, and to a less extent, Canada, benefit for many years from nearshoring of US manufacturing because of the regional free trade agreement and the proximity. However, the coronavirus pandemic has disrupted several global value chains of production and has introduced new security and dependency concerns into the equation. And such is the case of medical supplies and equipment, for instance. Until now, decision-making in the development of global value chains was guided by the concept of just-in-time delivery. But now we are hearing more and more that just in case it is better and wiser to produce locally or nearby a product seen as strategic by a given country. In essence, reshoring, deshoring, and nearshoring, particularly in manufacturing, are expected to continue to gain traction in the months and years to come. And yes, I believe that Brazil can benefit from these processes and new opportunities very much. I think that you are well informed about Brazil's assets, capabilities, and strengths. Of course, we have weaknesses too, but now I'll highlight the positive side. As the 8th largest economy of the world and the 5th largest country in territory and population, our abundant natural resources, minerals and oil reserves, the richest biodiversity in the world, a world leader in clean energy with one of the cleanest electric power mixes in the world, a diversified economy, an agricultural powerhouse with a robust industrial base, the 6th biggest automobile industry in the world, and a sophisticated service sector, a vibrant private sector, a solid banking system, and a skillful labor force. More importantly, our democratic institutions are strong. A robust check and balance system in place, an independent judiciary, organized opposition, rule of law, freedom of speech, free press, and so on. Nobody is above the law in Brazil. Brazil will soon resume the structural reforms of its economy in the wake of a successful reform of its pension fund system last year. The agenda of reforms includes, among others, tax simplification, public sector streamlining, budget flexibility, central bank's formal independence, a sweeping privatization program, and a comprehensive program of infrastructure concessions. Trade liberalization ranks high in the agenda, and trade deals with overseas partners will help to integrate our manufacturing sector into global value chains. By the way, Brazil has already 16 operational export processing zones, which actually are free trade areas in 15 Brazilian states in all of our regions. They're eager to receive foreign investment to produce for exports in exchange for tariff and tax incentives, administrative benefits, and legal stability and transparency. In order to learn more about our EZPs, I invite you to visit an online publication called Investment Guide to Brazil, prepared by Apex, which is our governmental agency that promotes exports and investment opportunities. Brazil will put its house in order while giving a boost to the competitiveness of its economy. We have one of the most closed economies in the world still, and there are plenty of low-hanging fruits before us in terms of trade creation and investment opportunities. Indeed, in the first quarter of 2020, Brazil was the only country of the G20 to experience growth in its exports. In 2020, the year of the pandemic, Brazil will have a historic harvest of more than 250 million tons of grain. Everything is being produced far and away from the Amazon with no subsidies and on a sustainable basis. It's not a coincidence that foreign direct investment in Brazil grew by 26% in 2019 in relation to the previous year, according to UNCTAD, the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. In 2019, Brazil was the 4th largest recipient of FDI in the world, only behind the United States, China, and Singapore. Believe me when I say that Brazil is well positioned to be among the main beneficiaries of this new phase of globalization. And Brazil and the United States specifically have much to gain from closer cooperation in all areas, and the case in point is precisely manufacturing. Our bilateral relationship is a two-way street, benefiting both countries with fair trade and a healthy investment environment. The United States is the main economic partner of Brazil, with more than $100 billion in investment stock. Brazilian investment in the US increased by 350% in the last 10 years, reaching almost $40 billion, supporting the creation of more than 80,000 jobs in the United States. Our bilateral trade has reached almost $60 billion in 2019. In trade with Brazil, the United States is only second to China. Our bilateral trade tends to be balanced. Last year, there was a small surplus for the US. And this is important. Much of our manufacturing trade is intra-company. That is exchange between parent companies and their subsidiaries. Our manufacturing sectors complement one another to a large extent. Just in the case of the Southeast region of the United States, Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, South Carolina, and Tennessee, Brazil has more than 35 companies, actually close to 40 companies investing and creating jobs in sectors such as apparel, construction material, chemicals, plastics, steel, electric engines, machinery, power transformers, aircraft, information technology, and artificial intelligence, and also in agriculture. In agriculture, Brazil and the United States are two formidable powerhouses and must not be scared to compete and cooperate with one another. The world is starving for our agricultural products and foodstuff. There's plenty of room for cooperation between our agricultural sectors, particularly in science, technology, and innovation, animal health, and protein processing equipment, PEA. I would like to see the establishment of an agricultural forum between Brazil and Georgia, or perhaps the southeast of the US, sooner rather than later, and I'm working on it with the support of our private sectors. I would not be surprised if trade and investment figures between Brazil and the United States were to double or triple in the coming years as globalization enters this new phase with an acceleration of reshoring and nearshoring. This would be such a positive development in the relationship between Brazil and the United States, the two largest democracies and economies of the Americas, and hopefully for the Western Hemisphere as a whole. Thank you. I hope I have answered your question.
Yes, so thank you so much, Ambassador Carlos Henrique de Abreu. Now I'm going to see the perspective of the academia. You know, we are very challenged by this new situation of the pandemic, the COVID, the geopolitics, you know, the trade war between the US and China before this pandemic, the globalization that we are talking to our students. So Professor Jorge Carneiro, how can our executive-oriented programs can help to develop new competencies that global leaders will need in this new scenario?
Oh, thank you very much for this question. As a former executive and a long-time academic now, this really intrigues me, right? We have to prepare our executives to face a new world. And much as the executives we have been interviewing, right, they say that they have been cooperating ever more with their suppliers and their clients. This is something new to Brazilians. Brazilians, as Erica said, we are very friendly in our personal relations, but when it comes to commercial relations, suppliers are suppliers, buyers are buyers, right? And we're not friends at all, right? We compete hand to hand for margins. So for a lot of Brazilian companies now, they understood that they need to come to the rescue of their suppliers, and they need to somehow lower their margins in order to keep their customers alive, so that they can come back when the pandemic is over and still have that chain in place. But cooperating is really something new to Brazilians, right? We have learned all the time to be more competitive. So we'll have to develop new ability, new skills in our executives. Behavioral skills, like to be more resilient, to be more empathetic to their workforce. We need to develop psychological skills, how to deal with stress, how to make decisions when the facts are either not clear or are contradictory. You know, nice models just don't work. We need more complex decision-making models that actually can deal with the internal contradictions, lack of information, right? But we have to make decisions anyway. This is something new. So the regular functional training that we used to give is not worth anymore. Of course, executives will have to know about operations, about marketing, about finance, strategy, but they'll need much more than that. And how to develop the social skills, behavioral skills, psychological skills, is tough. You only develop them in a practical, let's say, settings. So we have to come to have classes where different executives from different academic and professional backgrounds come together, and they have dilemmas to resolve together, simulations where they work, and where they will have to make all those decisions and face all those different challenges. But this entails a challenge for us, professors. It's not going to be centered on us, but centered on the students. Right? So the thing is, how do we develop it? How do we shape the future global leaders to be resilient and to be able to continue their businesses in the face of discontinuities that come from the external world? So our executives will have to be much more psychologically prepared, socially engaged, and I would say they have to become even better citizens, because the world as it goes is unsustainable. So how do we develop a balanced mindset of earning margins, of course, but at the same time keeping the world? We may have to rethink whether it makes sense to have unicorns. So take any company that is worth more than $1 billion and take the lowest in the rank employee or supplier working to them. Take these delivery companies, right? How much does a delivery guy earn? And without a delivery guy, e-commerce is not there. Food delivery is not there. And then they boast that they are worth more than 1 billion, but they actually getting people starving there. This is totally unfair. So when are we going to stop praising these executives that make their companies worth 1 billion? And we forget what is behind that. Why not, would 300 million be enough? I think it would be more than satisfactory for any company to be worth 300 million, a startup, right? When it comes to 300 million. Why more at the expense of the populations that actually are working a lot? So this balance between capital and labor has to be fought again. But at our schools, we may not be doing a good job. We may still be teaching our executives to go for return on investment, as long as legal, let's say, constraints are attended. I hope I have addressed this point, and really, we need, as academics, we need to do a lot, and executives need also to be willing, right, to change their mindset and work for a better world for our kids, our grandkids. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Maria Luisa, please. You muted. You muted.
Yes, sorry guys. So Lucia, now the ball goes in your ground, right? So we have the government in one side, and we have the companies, right? And how we're going to prepare the leaders. But so BACC is in the role and has this mission as a two gateway, right, for the members, and to promote and create a new commercial and personal links between Brazil and the southeastern of United States. So how you think the chamber could help also on this process, right? And with the mission, considering all this context of coronavirus, what are the changes you believe that can be also stick after that?
Oh, I think it's quite difficult to come after Professor Jorge when he talks about capitalism or capital labor, and seeing that our small business is suffering so much these days. So I'm going to try to just be relevant here, and an organization like ours, whose mission is to foster business and trade, is certainly dealing with the challenges put forth by the pandemic. Although it's true that many activities cannot be performed during the current limitations, and it also applies to any business, we have worked extremely hard to stay relevant and true to our commitments. For BACC, we are committed to serve as a key vehicle of information, connections, and resources. So since the beginning of March, the Chamber has invested heavily in these three pillars. To offer information, we have hired a journalist that help us write and post articles on social media platforms regularly. We have chosen topics that are relevant to promote business and trade. We have also hosted and participated in webinars like this one, and have taken the time to hold education sessions about the topics from the guide the guide of entrepreneurship, which Professor Maria Luiza is one of the authors. We have covered doing business in the US, in the legal and aspects of doing business in the US for a small business, how to write business plans, and ways that we are educating our small business in these challenging times. So both activities in the information area, which is the writing and posting, keeping our members and others informed, have helped us to continue to help everyone stay abreast of current events and opportunities for business between Brazil and the US. During this time, it is especially important to inform others, and I believe that companies should try to keep in contact with their stakeholders and don't miss that connectivity, because it's very important. As you know, this time passes, you need to continue to be in the mind of your either clients or consumers, because this is the time to stay connected. It has been our goal also during this time to connect with both our important relations that we have with Brazil and also here in the US. This is another area in which we have achieved some formal agreements to continue to support each other. We are now an official partner with the World Trade Center, which is a very important organization that can help us to expand our reach. And also in Brazil, we are discussing a formal agreement with SEBRAE, which is the Small Business Administration, and helping small companies in Brazil understand about globalization. So another aspect is really to keep your relationship alive. We have kept in touch with our members, our prospective members throughout this pandemic. It may not be the right time to recruit new members or even go after new clients, but your interaction with them aims to understand that you are there for them, and they will remember you when the time comes to either join the organization or buy your products. Lastly, our resources. Our resources are our members. Our members consist of a diverse stakeholders that range from lawyers, investors, CEOs, and consultants. This group of business professionals have a stake in Brazil and have insights into the social economic impact the coronavirus has had on Brazil. So we have been able to connect with them and offer their services throughout these challenging times. I wanted to finish up by saying that business should not give up. The market, it will reopen soon, and you should be ready. This is the time to find opportunities and take advantage of them. Understand that the restart is not when the pandemic ends or when the vaccine is found. Whoever is quick and proactive will win over those who are waiting for a never to come magical signal. If you need assistance, we are here and are happy to assist you in this phase as you plan your restart. So that's my message.
Thank you, Lucia. Now, Erica Kovacs, you're in one of the top business universities and college in the US. And, you know, we are curious to know what in your opinion, are topics that will emerge for research in international business now? You know, usually we as Brazilian, we have the image, and our students also have the image of Brazil as a friendly country, the Amazon forest. But now we see that European Union, the Mercosur agreement, some commercial agreements are postponed because of deforestation in Brazil, political different views, and so on. You know, many other things about cultural issues. What is, in your opinion, topics that will emerge and are for opportunity for research?
Well, that's a very good question. I think there are so many opportunities, Salomao, right now for research. And it's always a challenge when you are researching. What is your main question, right? I would divide, well, I think in 3 main topics. One is supply chain. The second one is leadership, well, as Professor Jorge already mentioned. And the third one is in cross-cultural management. So when we talk about supply chain, I think it's very interesting to do some research right now on how will companies redesign their supply chain, because up to now there was a lot of focus on efficiency, cost, right? But now I think a lot of industries are very concerned about being dependent on some countries, especially after COVID. A lot of transportation was affected. Some sources were affected. And also, so this is definitely going to be, well, supply chain is going to be affected. And companies might be also more aware of environmental issues as well. And remote servicing might be a very hot topic, because I know companies, I was talking to some CEOs and they were telling me about their stories. For example, when you have companies who do service, in a case like that with the pandemics, you have some companies, they had employees stuck in more than a country who couldn't go back home. So how can you change that? How can you avoid that maybe in the next pandemic or something like that? So maybe remote servicing would be a trend. How to sell more on the internet instead of person-to-person direct selling. We still have a lot in Brazil. So that's one topic, supply chain. In terms of leadership, I was reading an article that was very interesting. This article is from 2017 with all of CEOs it was research with CEOs that said that 65% of the CEOs at that time realized that there was a clash between the functional and the strategic areas of the companies, and only 18% were very satisfied with the management of the company. And I would think that right now with the pandemics, when you have everybody working virtually, developing those, finding out which are the new skills to have a better management, to better manage your team. Well, you cannot read their body language when they are online, right? It's different. Distractions. So what are the skills? How can we be more effective leaders in this new environment, right? Especially because, and in this research, they were talking about team interaction. So teams are not interacting the same way. Then collective approach. It's very hard to be collective when you are working in different houses. And I'm pretty sure for some companies, they realize that you can work from home and this trend will continue, right? Either here in the US or in Brazil as well. So this is a general, especially because in Brazil, when we compare the leadership styles, Brazilians are very team-oriented, right? That's a very paternalistic leadership, team-oriented, interdependent, collectivist. It's a very participative leadership. So virtual environment, influencing all that would be a great topic for research. And my last one would be about cross-cultural management too. So what is the impact of technology? What is the impact of all these changes in the work environment in cross-cultural management, all these cultural dimensions that I mentioned before? When we talk about Brazilians being more indirect or being more high context, when you are online, you have to be more direct, especially when working in different cultures, you have to be more low context. We don't have the cafezinho breaks, right? The breaks for coffee, we have to be more efficient because you have other things to do at home, other distractions. As I mentioned, the physical touch isn't there. So what is the impact? How is it going to affect the cultural dimensions per se? So I think those are very interesting topics that will come up after COVID. Yes, thank you. So.
Excellent, excellent. With your permission, Maria Luiza and Salomao, perhaps we can turn to some of the questions. We appreciate some 120 plus people on this call, everybody. You know, I'll just make a general comment. First of all, this has been very, very valuable, very insightful, a lot of learning for me. When I think of Brazil and Brazilians, what comes to mind first is the jeitinho, finding a way. And Brazilians taught the world how to build resilience, which George talked a lot about too. I mean, the ability to manage and cope with adverse conditions, I think is probably something unique to emerging markets too, because they have more than their share of disruptions, dramatic events, whether natural or man-made, calamities. They deal with a lot of uncertainty. We know that our business people are actually risk takers. They're much more entrepreneurial, much more venturesome. So there's a lot of good things there, good assets that the ambassador talked about too. I really appreciate the importance of free media, free speech, freedom of expression as well. These are very, very important things that not necessarily all emerging markets have. So I think there will certainly be a rebound. We expect a rebound from emerging markets, perhaps much faster than the advanced economies. And those that will lead will be the ones that can actually find a way out of difficulties and build resilience. Now, one question that comes up is China. China, of course, is Brazil's largest trading partner, even though it's slanted towards commodities, minerals, agricultural goods as well. But the question is about whether or not the rift, the trade conflicts, trade tensions between the US and China will become a favorable factor for Brazil. Would any of you would like to respond to that, perhaps? Maria Luiza, okay, you say you have some thoughts on that. You're muted, okay.
Me? No. I was thinking that as if we adopted the Brazilian perspective, I think there's the national priorities that the country will focus. And as I was thinking about the reshoring, the nearshoring, this brings opportunities for Brazil, but not necessarily we in Brazil have all the conditions to receive all of that. So, and I think Ambassador also can complement something, because even if we have a lot of a partnership with China, and China, this partnership with a lot of emerging countries too, there's a shift also from Brazil that is needed to get out from the commodities export and to work more on the value added, what is providing internationally. And I think this is something that the shift, if Brazil reduces and increase, it will be valuable also in terms of the country and let's say the country development as a whole. I don't know if Ambassador wants to add something.
Yes, let me just have a sip of water.
Sorry.
Well, first of all, yes, China is our main trading partner. It has become an important source of investment. But in terms of trade, in reality, our trade with China, we export mainly commodities, right, and foodstuff. In the case of the US, it's very different. We export mainly manufacturing and goods. So there is a quality difference here, which is very important to highlight. And make no mistake about it, and our relationship with the US has a great potential and untapped potential, because we're two democracies. We share common values, common principles. See, almost the sky is the limit in terms of cooperation between our two countries. And at the end of the day, you know, as a diplomat, I could say this, that in foreign relations, interests, our national interests, always tend to prevail, especially in the medium and long run. I don't know if I addressed your question.
Yeah,
I could.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. You made a very good point. Thank you. Another question revolves around perhaps some of the bad press or negative press Brazil gets outside of Brazil, especially these days. I mean, even today, Wall Street Journal, there's an article about, you know, threat of a potential military intervention, things like that. So why is that, and to what extent that is that negative image developed by the, let's say, media outside of the country, outside of Brazil, will hurt Brazil, and what can we do about it? Any of you care to respond?
Would you like me to? Am I
Please.
supposed to go first?
Please, Ambassador
I
Carlos.
think so. Yes.
You
I think
are closest to this issue.
No, I see where this question, let's say, is coming from. Listen, well, first of all, when you see, we have a free press in Brazil, make no mistake about it, it's as free as it can be. But for those who are interested in following closely what's happening in Brazil, I would advise, if I may, and I hope you can understand Portuguese, read the Brazilian press. But don't just read one source, as many sources as you can, and you're going to have a rather balanced view of what's happening in Brazil. A coup d'etat is absolutely out of question. Make no mistake about it. But it's interesting to see how there is a sort of a gap or a cleavage between what the Brazilian press is saying and the international press, which is very interesting. Which is very interesting. I remember I remember I was in those days in my previous life as Consul General of Brazil in Sydney, Australia, when one of our presidents was impeached because simply she behaved irresponsibly from a fiscal perspective. And that's a crime. And that's a crime. And also, an ex-president went to jail. The sentence, he went to jail because of corruption. And actually, I could see in the international press the view that this was an attempt of the conservatives or right-wing movement in Brazil to remove from power the PT government.
Mm.
And actually, there was a demonstration in front of the consulate of my office in Sydney. And the demonstrators asked me to go down and talk to them. And I did, and they were very kind, I must say. They were all foreigners, a few Australians, indeed, no Brazilian was there. And it's interesting because they wanted us to prevent a president who was elected by almost 60 million people from becoming president. And also they wanted me, us, Brazil, to free from jail a president who was sentenced by corruption and keep in power a president who behaved irresponsibly from a fiscal perspective.
Right.
Really, that's a tall order for a democracy.
Mm-hmm.
But really, I know that I'm totally in favor of free press. And I read the New York Times almost every day, the Wall Street Journal. But I really would advise you to follow closely our press. And there is now CNN Brazil, absolutely independent. Watch it more closely, because plus there are demonstrations in Brazil. There have been for a long time, for several reasons, but they're mainly peaceful, peaceful demonstrations.
That's great advice, to read widely and to read the local news as well. What the two instances that you talked about, remarkable, only happened, as far as I can remember, in South Korea, removal of a sitting president. Yeah. So with that, I'd like to thank all of our panelists here, and especially Salomao and Maria Luiza for organizing this session. It's been very insightful. I really appreciate your participation here, everybody who's been on the call. With that, I'll turn to Anna.
Yes, I just wanted to say thank you so much to all of our panelists for sharing this great information with us today. And thank you to everyone who has joined us today. Lots of great questions. A few reminders to highlight before we go. Please take 60 seconds to provide your post-event feedback when you exit the session, as we greatly appreciate your input for our continuous improvement efforts. You'll be prompted to complete the survey once you leave the webinar. You can also email me with any follow-up thoughts or questions you may have. We'd love for you to join us for the next webinar in this series, which will be about using multimedia for interactive synchronous online teaching for IB. The live session will be tomorrow, Thursday, June 11th. But again, all of the webinars in this series are being recorded and will be shared at cyber.gsu.edu. So no need to fret if you're unable to participate in a live session. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn, and we're new to Instagram, to stay up to date on all the other happenings here at GSU Cyber. Thanks again for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.
We look forward to seeing you all tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Thank the audience also.
See you next time. Thank you.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you.
Well, I think we got a very, good set of questions, right? If you could have forwarded those questions to us, I really would like to reflect on them. Right? And I wish we had time to discuss more.
Absolutely. I'll send you a list of all the questions and comments that were made in the chat as well.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for this opportunity. It was great seeing you here. Right?
It was great to see you, Jorge. My former professor, nice to see you.
Very good to see you, Maria Luisa.
Yeah,
okay.
You have to visit me someday here.
I hope so. But Brazilians are not welcome in the United States now, right? We cannot travel.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Let's wait a while, right?
Yeah, it's nice to see you.
I think we'll not travel anywhere this year. Tamir, by the way, how are things in Turkey?
I don't know if you want to talk this with a lot of people are still on the line, so you and I should have a conversation. But what I mentioned earlier, the importance of free speech, free media, that's something that Brazilians enjoy and cherish. We cannot say that for other countries. So that's a big bottleneck, and lack of change in leadership. It's a big problem. But we can talk about that offline. Thank you again. Thank you. Thank you.
Tamir, just one comment quickly. Actually, Brazilian press is free. That does not mean it is neutral, which is not, right? There are vehicles, very right-wing, some very left-wing, but it's part of democracy. But the thing, what happens is this, our president has been so confrontational against the press, unnecessarily confrontational, that of course he does not get good reviews, just like Mr. Trump. Why that behavior? So if they were just more technical in their speech, it would help a lot. So the press, of course, is not satisfied with the way they are being treated by our presidents.
Right. Yeah, you make a good point. Thanks again. Thanks again.
Thank you very much.
Hey.
Hope to see you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.